They abandoned my son. I didn't abandon justice.
The phone rang, an unknown number. Ryan McMahon, hands greasy from the Mustang he was rebuilding in his garage, almost ignored it. But something made him answer. It was a sheriff's deputy. They had his son, Isaac. A jolt of ice shot through him. Isaac was supposed to be in Colorado with his mother, Jacqueline, and her new husband, Clayton. But he wasn't. He'd been found alone, injured, at a gas station nearly 400 miles away. Ryan drove faster than he ever had, his heart pounding against his ribs. When he walked into the station, his world fractured. There was Isaac wrapped in a blanket, his small arm in a sling. Bandages covered bullet wounds on his shoulder and leg. Teenagers had found him alone with $40 and beaten him for it. But the deepest wound wasn't physical. It was the hollow, vacant stare of a child who'd been cast aside. Through quiet sobs, Isaac explained, the trip to Aspen was supposed to be a bonding vacation. Instead, Clayton's own children, Brent and Virginia, relentlessly mocked him, calling him dead weight. Clayton wanted a fresh start, and he told Jacqueline that her son, Isaac, didn't fit into that picture. So, in the pre-dawn darkness, they drove out of their way, pulled into a gas station, and left him there. They handed him a note telling him he didn't belong in their new family, and then they drove away, leaving him alone in the cold. Holding his son, Ryan made a vow. He would never be abandoned again. As Isaac slept soundly in his old bed, safe at last, Ryan went to work. The sheriff's office couldn't find Jacqueline or Clayton. They had vanished. Their phones were off, credit cards silent. They were hiding, thinking they'd gotten away with it. What they didn't know was that Ryan wasn't just a mechanic. He'd spent years in marine intelligence, tracking people who were experts at disappearing. He started digging into Clayton's past, and what he found was a cesspool of fraud and manipulation. He located Clayton's first wife, Christine. She told a chilling story of how Clayton had emotionally abused their own children, turning them against her. The more Ryan dug, the darker the picture became. He discovered that just days before abandoning Isaac, Clayton had purchased a secret, multi-million-dollar compound in the Cayman Islands. That wasn't a family vacation. It was an escape route. Using his old military contacts, Ryan traced Clayton's financial transactions directly to that compound. He also reached out to an investigative journalist, Don Turner, who had tried to expose Clayton years ago but never had enough proof. Now he did. Ryan then found Clayton's former business partner, Luther Fisher, a man Clayton had betrayed and left to rot in prison. Ryan offered him something Clayton never would, justice. Fisher agreed to testify, eager for a chance to set the record straight. The pieces of the puzzle were all there. Ryan began feeding a steady stream of information to the authorities, the local sheriff, the FBI, Interpol, and even the Cayman police. He also leaked key documents to Dan Turner. The resulting expose was explosive. It detailed everything: Clayton's financial crimes, the money laundering, the calculated emotional abuse of his own children, and the cruel, premeditated abandonment of Isaac. Clayton's real estate empire, built on lies, crumbled overnight. The final act began when Cayman police raided the luxury compound. Faced with the truth, Jacqueline broke down completely. She confessed everything, handing over all the evidence Clayton had tried to destroy. Clayton himself made a desperate run for it, trying to escape on a boat, but he was caught. When he was extradited back to the U.S., Ryan was there, waiting. The once arrogant tycoon looked like a cornered animal, disheveled, furious, and broken. He snarled at Ryan, blaming him for ruining his life. Ryan's reply was cold and simple. "You destroyed yourself long before I ever got involved." The trial was a media sensation. The prosecution laid out an airtight case. They showed the gas station security footage of a small boy left alone in the dark. They presented Isaac's medical records. Fisher testified about the fraud. Christine testified about the abuse. In a shocking turn, Clayton's own children, Brent and Virginia, gave statements confirming their father had groomed them to torment Isaac, but it was Jacqueline's full confession that sealed his fate. The jury found Clayton guilty on all counts: child abandonment, endangerment, fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no parole for at least 7. His assets were seized and distributed to his victims. Jacqueline, for her cooperation, received a 2-year sentence for child endangerment. Ryan couldn't bring himself to forgive her. But he left the choice of future contact up to Isaac. Months later, in a therapist's office, Isaac met with his mother. She apologized, tears streaming down her face. Isaac listened, calm and mature, far beyond his years. He offered no promises of forgiveness, but he listened. 2 years passed. Isaac healed. The physical scars faded, and slowly the emotional ones did too. He spent his afternoons in the garage, working beside his father, learning to rebuild engines. In a surprising turn, Brent and Virginia, finally free from their father's toxic influence, began to rebuild their own lives. They reached out to Isaac, slowly and carefully earning back a sliver of trust. Christine regained full custody of her children, and Luther Fisher, now a free man, became a fierce advocate against corporate crime. Everyone Clayton had harmed began to find their own path to healing. One evening, Ryan and Isaac sat on the dock, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Dad," Isaac asked quietly, "will I ever forget what happened?" Ryan put his arm around him. "Maybe not," he said, "but you won't be defined by it. You'll be stronger because of it." Isaac rested his head on his father's shoulder, feeling completely and utterly safe. In the end, they had won, not with revenge but with truth. They had exposed a monster and refused to let him write their future. Isaac was no longer the boy abandoned at a gas station. He was a survivor. And Ryan, the man who rebuilt old cars, had rebuilt something far more precious: his son's life. Thanks for watching. If you were moved by this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more.